From Fronteras, the Changing America desk, this is the Border and the Mexican Ballot. I'm Monica Ortiz-Uribe. On July 1st, Mexico will hold a presidential election. The winner will face the daunting task of solving the country's escalating drug war. The next president must also find ways to grow Mexico's economy and rethink the country's energy portfolio. Three main candidates are vying for the job. The frontrunner is Enrique Peña Nieto, a member of the Institutional Revolutionary Party. The PRI ran Mexico for more than 70 years before losing the presidency in 2000. Josefina Vázquez Mota is the first woman making a significant bid for the presidency in Mexico's history. She's running as the National Action Party candidate. The PAN is conservative and pro-business. Finally, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He's the leftist candidate who narrowly lost the election in 2006. He's been gaining ground in the polls. In some places along the U.S.-Mexico border, you may be surprised to hear that Americans have a stake in who wins. A team of Fronteras reporters were dispatched to communities that straddle both countries. From East Texas to Arizona, we'll meet those reporters in just a moment. But first, why do Americans care about what happens in Mexico on July 1st? Peter O'Dowd reports.
Standing on the edge of this unfinished railroad bridge outside of Brownsville, Texas, you can see across the Rio Grande into Mexico. It's the first new rail bridge to connect the countries in a century. And for businessman John Wood, it's a symbol of the way lives connect along the border.
So we have a tremendous investment in our trade and our commerce with Mexico. We are tied together. It's kind of like an umbilical cord.
Texas does more business with its southern neighbor than any other state, and that's a big reason why Wood says Mexico's upcoming election means as much to him as the battle between President Obama and Mitt Romney.
If Mexico isn't doing well, it doesn't seem to be a whole lot of difference what's happening in Washington.
Wood says Mexico's next president could help make the country well again. A more stable and calmer Mexico would mean more investment and more jobs in Brownsville. Some Americans along the border have a huge stake in Mexican politics. The Woodrow Wilson Center estimates the two countries traded a record $500 billion in goods and services last year. Investment fell off during the recession, but has steadily climbed back despite escalating drug violence. Analysts say business would strengthen even more if Mexico solved its cartel problem. That's absolutely right, according to Daniel Hong. He owns this general goods store a few yards from Brownsville's port. The vast majority of Hong's customers are from Mexico, and because of the violence in neighboring Matamoros just across the Rio Grande, his sales have dropped 60% in recent years.
Simply put, if there are random occurrences of gunfire outside of your house, that makes you less inclined to actually walk out your house and go about your daily duties.
That means fewer customers for Hong, so he has an opinion on the election. On a personal level, he supports the National Action Party, or the PAN, and the continuation of President Felipe Calderón's drug war offensive. But on a business level, he supports the PRI. The Institutional Revolutionary Party ran Mexico for 70 years and kept relative peace by turning a blind eye to the cartels.
If Mexico goes back to its old ways as far as quote-unquote corruption, government powers taking bribes in order to let the drugs flow freely, in a sense that will cut the violence.
There's also a third option for president. Leftist candidate Andrés Manuel López Obrador has surged in the polls in recent weeks and is now in second place. It's clearly not just American border businesses with a stake in the elections. It's Mexican businesses too.
The city of Reynosa is just south of McAllen, Texas, and the neighborhood I'm in now used to be a destination for Americans, but the economy and the security situation in Mexico has done damage to local businesses. Just behind me was a nightclub called the Red Dragon, but it was torn down about a year ago. So the question is, will the upcoming presidential elections on July 1st do anything to help Mexico's problems and help bring American business back over the border?
Here at the Mercado Zaragoza in Reynosa, violence and the economic crisis were the final straws for some businesses that were already struggling. This shop owner says business here, including his, used to depend almost completely on American shoppers. Now, Mexican shoppers are slowly trickling back, but business is nothing like it used to be. Hernandez says he feels none of the Mexican political parties has a serious plan for tackling the country's insecurity. He says he hopes the parties will take a clear stance on the issue, that they'll approach it with intelligence, courage, and heroism. That's what Mexico needs right now, he says, a hero. Back in the U.S., plenty of Americans are looking for a solution to Mexico's problems, too. They want a Mexican president who can return life along the border to the way it used to be.
Really, the election of the president is a referendum on who best can return Mexico to normal.
Zavaleta says normalcy is important to the psyche of the entire border community. It's not just businesses with ties to both countries, it's Americans like him who see Mexico as a second home, as a place where friends and families live.
We live with one foot in each country all the time. I know it can get better. We have to hope that this election will set it on the right track to getting better.
Zavaleta believes frontrunner Enrique Peña Nieto of the PRI has the best chance to bring the border back to normal. As an American, he can't vote July 1st, but he will be watching.
Peter O'Dowd filed that report, and he joins me in the studio with fellow Fronteras reporter Jill Replogle. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So, Peter, you traveled with a group of reporters along the border. Tell us where you went and what you learned.
That's right. Jill and I and another reporter, Michel Marisco, we started in Brownsville, as you saw on the video there. We went back and forth across the border. We went down into Reynosa, Matamoros. We spent a few days down in San Fernando, which is about 100 miles south of the border. We spent 5 days in East Texas and East Mexico, and then we transitioned into Arizona as well, where we went to the state of Sonora, and we visited Agua Prieta and Altar. So it was a long trip, and we learned along the way that it was really common for people on the U.S. side of the border to have a degree of fluency in the presidential elections. You know, you go around asking a person, you know, what do you think about the upcoming election in Mexico, and they say, well, you know, I'm a fan of the PRI, or I'm PAN all the way, or I'm an Obrador fan, and you would say, well, you can't vote, but that was a surprising thing to us, because I live in Phoenix, and I don't think it's the same way, just a couple hundred miles to the north.
And so, Jill, on the Mexican side, did Mexicans think that Americans across the border should care about their election?
Yeah, many of them did. We talked to a group of young people at a political rally. You saw some of them in the video. And first of all, I thought it was telling that they all spoke nearly perfect English, and they clearly spent a lot of time on both sides of the border. And they really emphasized the fact that, we're such close brothers, and even literally there are so many families that have members on both sides of the border. And they're also very clear that the U.S. drug problem is really what's fueling Mexico's security problems, and they have that very clear in their minds. And so that's a big reason why they think we should care.
So getting to the issue of security, was that a problem for you all as you were traveling, and what precautions did you take?
I think one thing we discovered on this trip, going to some cities that had a pretty large reputation for having violence in their past, we didn't see any problems. And I think the sense that we got was that it kind of depended on being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So the week before we got to Matamoros, for instance, just a couple hundred miles, less than, probably 150 miles to the west, there had been a big body dump, dead bodies found along the side of the highway. The week after we left the city, there were 3 grenade attacks in Matamoros. So, it seemed rather calm while we were there. I mean, we saw police in their caravans, and we saw definitely members of the military, but there was no actual violence while we were there.
Okay, well, that leads us into our second report. It's a kind of postcard, a look at Fronteras reporters Peter O'Dowd, Jill Replogle, and Michel Marisco's journey to the embattled city of San Fernando in northeastern Mexico.
Commander Juan Ramos and his unit patrol San Fernando in small convoys, usually 4 to 5 cops per truck, each in a black tactical uniform and body armor, a combat helmet, and a long automatic rifle. There is no local police force. It was disbanded when this town started making headlines. We wanted to know why that happened. He won't say why. In fact, most of his answers are curt. San Fernando lies about 150 miles south of Texas, along a lonely highway bordered by endless crop fields of sorghum grass reddening in the steamy heat. It's one of those highways known for narcobloqueos, roadblocks manned by drug gangs looking for rivals or victims. Even Mexico's toughest reporters are reluctant to come here. Get in, do your job, leave immediately. That was their advice. With 60,000 people, it's laid out like many Mexican towns. People sit in the plaza in the shade of small trees in the tall steeple of the church. It's calm, quiet, not a city that would normally enter into one's mind when we think of Mexico's drug wars. But in 2010, it began. Soldiers found 72 bodies buried in a mass grave. Then a year later, again. San Fernando has become the type of town analysts speak of when they refer to the threat of a failing state. Local police were no help, so the country turned to its military to establish order and its state police to do local policing. Now the town is under armed guard 24 hours a day. Locals avert their eyes. Checkpoints bottle up the highways leading into the city from the south. Yet somehow, this town is going to have to vote in 2 weeks. Father Hilario del Pozo Noyola says San Fernando's become Satanized. The military, he says, has been effective, but it's not a long-term solution.
Hay que buscar que se tengan las autoridades adecuadas.
San Fernando needs its own police force and prosecutors and a local justice system.
La Procuraduría.
The conservative PAN party's campaign office is next door. Francisco Quintanilla is the PAN's campaign manager here.
Tenemos que apoyar la política del presidente Calderón.
He says the PAN will continue Calderón's economic and security policies.
Económica y de seguridad.
Right now, that means the military. Locals are reluctant to speak on camera here, but one man, Jose Galvan, tells me on tape that he's voting for Enrique Peña Nieto, the PRI candidate.
Debe de cambiar radicalmente.
He says Mexico needs a radical change. The PAN started a war against a people who were not hurting locals, only each other, he says. For Mexico, he says, it's time to start acting like a developed nation again.
So Jill and Peter, tell me about what it was like reporting from San Fernando after these 2 horrific events, the 2 mass graves that were discovered. Are there still traces of fear in San Fernando, or have people moved on?
Well, it was challenging, definitely, the reporting. We, Michel Marisco had gotten in touch with the state police to see if we could do a ride-along with them, because we wanted to see, from their perspective, what it's like to patrol this town. There is a huge contingent of state police, and there's also a big army contingent right outside of town. And they ended up staying with us the entire day and would not leave our side. They had orders directly from, the state government to not let anything happen to us. So that made it a little complicated to talk to locals, but at the same time, you can really tell that that the locals are scared. I mean, most people wouldn't talk to us, even off camera, and would avert their eyes when the camera came around. And there's clearly an environment of fear and just everyone's sort of very quiet.
Yeah, and if I could just add something, I mean, I was doing some photography in the plaza when Michel was doing his interviews, and to go up with a camera, I mean, not only would they avert their eyes, they would cover their faces with their shirts and say no photographs, no photographs. And I've not experienced that in the reporting that I've done on this side of the border, and I think that was telling.
So, as it stated in the report, Mexicans, including the people in San Fernando, are going to have to make a very big choice this coming Sunday about who is going to lead the country next. What was your sense about how people felt about the election? Are they going to vote, and have they made a decision? Are they excited?
I think it's on a lot of people's minds. I mean, it was political season. It was presidential season while we were there. The rallies, you know, in the cities that we went to, you know, they would be in the afternoon, or, you know, you'd see signs absolutely everywhere. You know, you'd see people actually putting the signs up for the political candidates. I think from the reporting that we've done, it was clear that people are interested in solving this security crisis. Now, how to do that is a completely different question. And as we've already seen in some of the reports, there was a lot of, you know, people are uncertain how either candidate is going to bring about, or any of the three major candidates will bring about the stability that they're looking for.
Yeah, I didn't get the sense from people that anyone was very excited about anyone's security platform. But the other big issue on everyone's mind in Mexico is the economy and jobs. And Mexico's economy is doing very well, but that hasn't necessarily trickled down to better salaries for some of the, you know, lower to middle class workers. And so that's been a huge issue for people, and that's something that some of the candidates are capitalizing on and sort of pushing that over the security issue, because they frankly don't have a very good solution to the problem.
Well, let's talk briefly about the front-runner candidate, Enrique Peña Nieto. His party ruled Mexico for 71 years, and there's a big possibility that that party might come back. How do people feel about him in particular and his security platform?
Well, he is leading in the polls, and I think that indicates that Mexico is ready for a change. But there is a lot of anxiety, I think, amongst those who don't support him, or even those who would vote for him, that say, we're worried that him representing the PRI will go back to the way that it was in, you know, when they ruled for 71 years, which is, you know, known for corruption and, you know, turning a blind eye, working deals out with the cartels, and I think people are concerned about that. Now, Nieto has said that it's a new world. It's, you know, this is not the way the party functions anymore. He's promised it won't be that way, but we won't really know until he wins, or if he wins. And I think that's a big question for the public: is what kind of PRI are we talking about?
And on the flip side of that, there's another contingent, and we interviewed some people who said exactly this, that they would like to see the PRI back in precisely because they think things will calm down, and that maybe they will make those deals, and maybe the security situation will go back to normal.
But Nieto has said, you know, that he wants to focus more on stopping the violence and stopping the kidnapping and these other terrible crimes, as opposed to making big, flashy cartel arrests and stopping the drugs from going north into the United States. He wants to, you know, create a really elite force of federal police to go into the worst parts of Mexico. And, you know, so those are some of his platforms. But again, you know, how do you solve the cartel problem? Well, good luck. I mean, it seems to be beyond probably any one person.
So for our final feature in this half-hour special, we visit an artist who lives along the border and whose work reflects some of the atmosphere we've been discussing.
Well, my name's Rigoberto Gonzalez. I was born in Reynosa, just across the border from McAllen, Texas. And I came here when I was 9 years old. I would consider myself a figurative painter, and I do you know, narratives, you know, stories. The artwork that I've always admired, you know, from the Renaissance and the Baroque period. Those paintings tell stories. This body of work, you know, dealing with the violence in Mexico, I started, I think the first painting that I did, it was a small severed head, a little like 20 by 18. The head is life-size. It's probably like in 2007. Because at that time, that's when it was started to be more on the news. And because of my interest in Baroque art, I couldn't help but connect it with, you know, like paintings of the head of John the Baptist, and, you know, the head of Goliath. And the stories, they can be stories that I hear on the news, that I read on the newspaper, that I hear on the radio, or stories that people tell me of things that have happened to them. There was a photo from the newspapers in Reynosa. There was a lady whose son had been killed by crossfire, and the composition was just like a Pietà from Renaissance. And you look at the armor of the Mexican Federal Police. It's as impressive as the armor of the Roman soldiers. For some reason, I've always had this interest in doing things that are terrible and beautiful. It does give me angst, but I think that's what great art really should inspire. There has been reluctance in some places to show the work because of the negative, you could say negative stories that I'm telling. But my hope is that it has like a cathartic quality to it, you know. You can't keep suppressing it, and I want you to talk about it. You show the work, it engages the public, starts a discussion, starts a dialogue. So that's really, that in a way, it's really what my work's about, is starting a dialogue and maybe start like a healing process for them. It's a Holocaust. And one thing that really strikes me also is when you see the man, when they're captured, you know, the people that are responsible, like the heads of the cartels and the hitmen, and I look at them, and I'm like, that looks like my cousin, or like looks like my brother. That could be me. That similarity like really scares me. But there are other stories, you know. There's incredible amount of dramatic quality to the stories of, you know, people leaving, like this one here. It's you know, people crossing the river. They're coming from Ciudad Juarez into El Paso. There's an incredible, you know, love of family, you know, people risking their lives to better care for their families. I think we hear a lot of sound bites on the news, and as an artist, I'm trying to do my part to expand upon those, you know, sound bites.
That was a very compelling, that's very compelling work that this man does. Can you tell me how you found him?
The premise of the series on the Mexican elections, going into this, I kind of wanted to think about what would a calmer and stabler, more stable Mexico mean to different people along the border, because conceivably that's what this presidential election is about, calm and stability. And I felt like an artist needed to be a part of that, because an artist is going to approach that question in a completely different way. So I frankly just Googled border artists, and his name came up, and he's a stunning artist.
And so Sunday, Mexicans are going to the polls. What can we expect, or should Americans care and be watching?
Well, I think you never know. There could be a surprise on Sunday. There's still about 15% of the voters who are undecided. You know, everyone's sort of assuming that Enrique Peña Nieto is going to win, but you never know. So it could be interesting.
Good point, because the last election 6 years ago was decided by a hair, and that would be interesting again if Obrador, who ran last time and barely lost, made a good run at the end.
Yeah, and maybe we should mention there were a lot of protests and sort of chaos that went about after the contested elections last time, and he has said that if he doesn't win, he will not do the same thing. So I think Mexico is hoping that everything will be calm and well run on Sunday.
And do you all think that the relationship between the United States and Mexico might change depending on who the winner is?
Well, American officials have said that, you know, Vice President Joe Biden went and met with all the candidates several months ago, and, you know, he and other American officials have made it clear that they are okay with any of the candidates and their security plan. But I guess we'll have to wait and see how things really play out in practice, because, you know, what a candidate says he's going to do and what actually happens afterwards are two very different things.
Okay, all right. And for the two of you, did you learn anything as Americans coming into Mexico and reporting on another country's election? I know, Jill, you're on the border in San Diego and Tijuana, but Peter, you're a little further north in Phoenix. Was there anything that surprised you along the way that you didn't expect?
It's more vocal than American elections. I think visually more interesting. I mean, I mentioned before the candidate signs, literally plastered everywhere. I don't know, do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Some of the rallies that I saw in Tijuana were just massive, and I haven't quite seen that here. People get really excited about the elections in Mexico, and some of that is, you know, I talked to a lot of people whose families have been pre-families, for example, forever, and so that's just, you know, it's in their blood, and they go out to all the rallies and they get riled up about it, and so yeah, definitely a lot of excitement.
Very good. And are you looking forward to covering the American election? And do you think that the next president in the United States will have a good relationship with Mexico, or will the relationship with Mexico change with whoever wins on our side?
I believe the relationship between the United States and Mexico is so important, and that's what I was trying to get at with the first story, is that the economic, what's at stake economically is so large that it's in both countries' interest to play well together. And I think that you'll see, while publicly, both administrations are saying, oh, we'll support you, and we're gonna get this done no matter who's elected. It's important that happens. Behind the scenes, who knows what they're saying, and who knows how concerned they are over one candidate or the other. But they will have to work together.
Very good, very good. Anything else you two would like to share in the final minute of our program? Any highlights we missed, maybe?
Well, it was certainly an adventure. I don't think either of us had been to that side of the border, and it gets less reported on in large part because of the security situation. So it was interesting just to go and get a feel of what it's like, and we met some Mexican journalists, and to understand what it's like to report in such a scary part of the country, and how limited they are in our reporting. So in some respects, I feel like it is incumbent upon American journalists to go to those places and do stories there, because a lot of times Mexican journalists can't do that without risking their lives and their families.
All right. You feel the same way?
Absolutely.
Very good. All right. Well, from everyone at the Fronteras, the Changing America desk, I'm Monica Ortiz-Uribe. Thanks for joining us.